Okay, it's 6:30 p.m. and I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It's a regular meeting. Today is Monday, November 23, 2020. We are meeting via Google Hangouts and conference calls. Could you call the roll, Ms. Heights?
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Mehring?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Ms. Bijak?
Here.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zach?
Present. Board has a quorum. I've been shown the proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law. Need to approve the agenda tonight. We have no action items. And we have 4 informational items, our usual superintendent's report and opening of school update and equity update, and then a short presentation from the Friends of the Orchestra regarding the WMEA standards. And then at the conclusion of that agenda, we'll move into closed session for the board to continue discussion regarding our bargaining. We will not return to open session after that closed session. So I would need a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
This is Tim, so moved.
I would second that. This is Anna.
Okay, all in favor, well, we got to do a roll call. Katie?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Mehring?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. Zach?
Yes, we have an agenda. Item A on that agenda is the consent calendar. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to have removed for discussion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar.
This is Anna. I would move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
This is Heather. I'll second.
Heather for the second. All right. I would note that amongst the items on the consent calendar are 2 donations from the PTO. One is for $10,550 for teacher department school requests, and then one for WSMA access for the Oregon Composition Club. So we thank the Oregon PTO for those donations. With that, would you call the roll, Ms. Heights?
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Mehring?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zach?
Yes, consent calendar items passed by 7-0 vote. That takes us to agenda item B, information items, comments received from the public regarding the agenda items. As noted on our agenda, we've modified the public comment period to reflect the fact that we're meeting virtually, and so we would accept any email communications filed with Ms. Heights by 4 p.m. today, no more than 250 words. We have, I think, about 6 or 7. Krista, is that correct? Something along those lines? Okay, and so I'd ask Krista, who is our clerk at this point in time, to read those into the record. They'll also be posted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. To Dr. Bergstrom and the Oregon School Board members, I'm writing to urge you to reconsider your stance on only providing virtual learning opportunities. It's been stated multiple times that students are receiving virtual education that is equivalent to an in-person instruction as far as educational quality and student welfare. This is simply not true. It was just discovered recently that my son's attendance for a class has been overlooked for the entire first quarter. Apparently, my son's name was on the class roster, but it wasn't discovered that he was missing from class until I inquired about a test score via his homeroom teacher. We never received any sort of outreach that he was missing from his twice-a-week class for an entire quarter. In addition to no welfare outreach, he didn't receive any instruction for this period of time. I believe he would continue to be overlooked had I not inquired about a score. I was informed by the teacher that the error occurred because she has not collaborated with his homeroom teacher because they are not working in the same building currently. This is not acceptable. I don't believe a child's absence from an entire quarter of education would have occurred if he was going to school in person. Our children deserve better. If I can get my hair cut, go out to eat, and shop at a retail store, my child should be able to go to school. That's from Jenny Fahey. Dr. Bergstrom, I'm addressing this letter to you since you are the one making decisions for our school district. I would like to go on record stating I think it is wrong the school board is not participating in the decision-making process and sharing in the responsibility. The Wanakee Community School District has announced plans to have all their students back in the classroom for the start of the second semester. Their middle and high school students will be back in a hybrid model. This move is based on the recommendations of their medical advisory board, the recommendations of the CDC, the World Health Organization, Dr. Joseph Allen, principal investigator of the Harvard study, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Leadership in Wanakee is dedicated to educating the students they serve. They have had their students K-4 back in the classroom since October 26th. Grades 5-12 will be back January 26th. While community spread continues to grow, we know now that schools are not a contributing factor to the rise in numbers. We have 2 months to plan and 3 vaccines hitting the market between now and second semester. Oregon failed to plan to get kids back in school in September. We could have had at least 2 months of learning under our belt before the actual spike in cases we are seeing now hit. Do not fail to plan again. Do not fail to get them back in January. This community expects an option for in-person learning second semester. The question is, do you have the will to make it so? Malia King. Dear Dr. Bergstrom and OSD school board members, the burden of deciding whether to return to in-person instruction is a huge responsibility not to be taken lightly. Late in the summer, when these decisions were being made, there was little evidence on how schools could open safely. You were making decisions blind. Professionals could only speculate on what might happen. We now have actual evidence that can be used to make more educated decisions. There have been cases in schools and some spread, but the preponderance of the evidence has shown that schools are safe. Schools which opened early in the school year have seen cases ebb and flow and have skillfully managed operations. They had systems in place when students had to be at home, and they have the flexibility now to move in and out of in-person learning as necessary. Oregon has none of that. We did not start in the fall when the case counts for our area were low. We do not have systems in place to move back and forth as needed. Now you find yourselves in the untenable position of thinking that Public Health Madison-Dane County's gating criteria might have been too stringent, but with climbing cases in the county, you don't dare move forward. As an administration and board, your inability to act when you could have has put us in this place. This week, the CDC director stated there's extensive data that confirms K-12 schools can operate with face-to-face learning, and they can do it safely and they can do it responsibly. Sincerely, Kim Palmer, OSD parent, on behalf of Bring Kids Back OSD. Rob Palmer. At the September 28th board meeting, Dr. Leslie Bergstrom said school districts are being given specific guidance from Public Health Madison-Dane County and that the Oregon School District is going to continue to follow it. That wasn't an entirely true statement. On September 1st, Kristen Oman of PHMDC sent an email to superintendents in Dane County stating that sports, extracurricular activities, school clubs, and open gyms could continue under Executive Order Number 9. OSD did not allow any of those activities committee to review health metrics, review student physical and mental health issues, and assess OSD positive and quarantine data. These are issues that demand immediate attention, yet 4 weeks later, the medical review committee has not yet held its first meeting. Where is the sense of urgency? In response to a public records request, Ms. Katie Heitz informed me on November 13th that 31 students have disenrolled from OSD since September 18th. Some of these students are being homeschooled, some are attending private schools in Dane County, some have enrolled in public schools in neighboring counties that permit in-person instruction. Some have even moved out of state so they can attend in person and participate in athletics. Doing less than allowed by PHMDC, foot dragging on the medical review committee, declining enrollment. As a parent and taxpayer, I give OSD an F for this semester. That was Robert Palmer. To whom it may concern, I am writing in support of students having the option to return to school in person. While I understand that COVID numbers in the community are on the rise, it has been shown that schools are not the hot spots for spread. I'm an in-person teacher in a nearby community for 5th graders. The students I have greatly appreciate the opportunity to be in school. The protocols in place have allowed students and teachers to feel safe. Families are grateful and supportive of their student being in school. Of course, there are times that students need to stay home due to contact. The majority of that contact has been outside of school. Families need to be on the same page as the schools for it to be successful. My 2 children are experiencing regression in their learning, attitudes, and mental health. They need to be immersed in education to make the gains they need. They need their teachers and classmates. Thank you to all the teachers who are working their hearts out to create the best engagement possible virtually. Thank you, Carrie Reeder, or Writer, R-E-U-T-E-R. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Dr. Bergstrom, please read this letter at the next school board meeting. As a parent of 2 children in Oregon, I'm writing to you and asking for your support and advocacy of science-based and expert-supported decision-making. Recently, the director of the CDC said that data support face-to-face learning in schools. If we are not listening to the advice of experts such as Dr. Redfield, then whose opinions are we guided by? Experts and children, my children, want kids to be back in school. Who is stopping them? By your decision-making to date, my children have suffered irreversible harm to their intellectual and social growth. Their school schedule appeals to the lowest common denominator of standards for their education, essentially engaged in class only 4 half days per week. They are not socializing and learning important skills about treating others with respect and fairness. They are not getting even casual exercise from moving about between classrooms. Please help reverse this negative trend and give my kids the life they deserve. Scott Telema, Oregon, Wisconsin. Dr. Bergstrom and Oregon School Board, thank you for all your hard work over this most difficult school year. It has not been easy. I know you are trying to make decisions that support what has been put out by the PHMDC months ago. However, Oregon needs to be a leader, allowing kids back to school when the new term starts in January. If you wait, based on your model, we could not return until the spring semester. The CDC and APP's recommendation is that kids are safer in school. There has been no data to support in-person learning or sports have attributed to the rise in COVID cases in grades K-12. Outside of Dane County, kids are back in school, playing sports, and returning to some sense of normalcy. Why should a kid in Dane County not have the same opportunities to those outside of Dane County? Oregon needs to be a leader, set an example, and get our kids back in school. I know some of your board members also believe in this as they have begun moving their kids out of the district. They want to provide their kids the opportunity for in-person learning. What example are we setting if our school board members are moving their kids out of the district to attend in-person classes we are unwilling to provide? Please return all our kids, not just the younger ones, to school in January. They deserve a quality education that online schooling cannot provide. Thanks. The Webbers. That's it.
Thank you, Krista. And thank you, everyone who sent in those comments for our consideration. And again, those will be posted. OEA report. Laura, I'm assuming nothing tonight, correct? I talked to you earlier.
That is correct. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Student report, I've got Chloe and Andrew. Chloe, are you up, or Andrew? See.
Yeah, I can start.
Okay, go ahead.
For the student report, OHS has had a lot more clubs that have began to get up and running. Last week, we had a presentation during our homeroom classes from the Hope Squad, which is a really cool group of students who've been trained to help out with students looking for some support with mental health issues. And they're just a really nice group of students who are looking to support their peers. So that's a really cool club that's begun to give a lot more presentations. Then peer tutoring has also become increasingly popular. I, for example, take part in peer tutoring. I tutor Algebra 2 twice a week. So I think that's been pretty popular for students to not only get help with education, but also meet someone, as well as just kind of keep them busy if they don't have enough to do. So that's a really great program right now. Today, we also had a presentation in homeroom from the Multicultural Student Union on Hispanic heritage. So they'll be presenting, I think, every third Monday during homeroom. And today they kind of talked about how others can get involved in their group. They touched on some common stereotypes of Hispanic countries. And yeah, it was a really great presentation. So I'm excited to see what else they have to say in the coming Mondays.
Thank you.
I don't really have a ton to say. I know yesterday I had a call with Mr. Kleiner regarding my student survey, but I just want to say that was nice that it had been received and looked at. Otherwise, I know there was one girls' basketball practice before Executive Order 10 came out and stated that they could no longer occur. And I think that's been really beneficial to those who are involved with that. I think I've talked to some people and they really enjoyed just being able to see each other in person and interact face to face, even though it was from 6 feet away and behind a mask and they were just dribbling around chairs and all that. But I think it's really great that that started before it had to be shut down. And I hope once we hit December 16th, we're able to pick that up again and hopefully in a greater capacity as well.
Hey, Andrew and Chloe, how did the virtual homecoming go? I know you had all sorts of activities.
Good. we had a lot of great feedback from the younger schools, and I got a lot of great feedback from teachers who were just really appreciative for the opportunities that some of the little kids got to take part in. It was pretty low interaction from some of the high schoolers, especially the seniors, which was kind of funny, but which makes sense given the virtual. Some people just kind of feel disconnected, but I think overall it was a really great way to get some people involved and kind of have some community spirit for OSD.
Great. Anyone with any questions for Andrew or Chloe? Okay, thanks you guys. That takes us out of informational items to action items. We don't have any discussion items, committee reports, policy. Anna?
So right now we do have a meeting that's currently scheduled for December 3rd from 5 to 6:30. But I just noticed in our weekly update that there is a Dane County Equity Consortium planned for that same night from 5:30 to 8:30. So I was going to reach out to see if there's any flexibility on potentially looking at some alternate dates to avoid a conflict for any board members who wish to attend the Equity Consortium. It's a Zoom meeting. It's a follow-up to some of the sessions that were held last year. So I think I'm going to try and see if we can choose a different date for policy. So for those reasons. So that's maybe to be determined. I see some nodding heads from Gina that we might be able to accommodate that. So that would be great. Otherwise, no further report.
Yeah, awesome, because I know people like the Equity Consortium work, and so if that conflicts, it would be nice to be able to have folks go to that.
Yeah, totally.
So that kind of ties in with the next report from Troy on visioning.
Yeah, so we have not met in the past 2 weeks, but we do have a meeting scheduled 2 weeks from tonight, December 7th, to discuss, to have our book discussion on CAST.
Okay. Troy, will you be facilitating that, or who visioning?
Dr. Bergstrom.
Okay. And so I know we've got some study questions that got sent out. I'm assuming those will form the basis, Dr. Bergstrom, of part of our discussion.
They were just to get everyone thinking. I think we'll have more, we'll have questions that are more aligned to the intersection with education.
Okay.
For our discussion.
All right. Thanks. Anything else, Troy or Anna?
Not for me.
Okay, that takes us to informational items. Our first item is a presentation from the Friends of the Orchestra. I think we have Jessica Sharkus on the line to talk about the WMEA standards. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie.
Well, thank you. I just want to do a very brief introduction because I think we have a bit of a treat in store for us this evening. We have a video showing the progression. Organization is a long-standing Oregon support, and it's for our orchestra students and their instructors from grades 4 through 12. And I believe their focus is of particular importance right now when you think about the role that music plays for students when so many of the things in their life aren't as they have been. And I think that music really helps them get through difficult things like that. So it plays a huge important role in the lives of our students right now. And Jessica Sharkus is on the board of Friends of Orchestra, and she is a parent in the OSD. She has 2 children here, and she will share the message from the photo group. So I pass it over to you, Mrs. Sharkus.
She is just jumping on
There
right now.
she is. Hi, Jessica. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Sorry if I'm late. Hi, my name is Jessica Sharkus, and I'm on the Friends of the Orchestra board. I am here tonight to share a snapshot of the state standards for music education and a short example of what they look like in action in orchestra classrooms. In 2015, music once again became federally recognized as an academic subject through the Every Student Succeeds Act. Music is a part of a well-rounded education that focuses on the 4 overarching standards of performing, creating, responding, and connecting. Through these standards, students not only learn how to become musicians, They learn about themselves and the worlds around them, and how to be critical thinkers who can analyze text and notation, rhythm, harmonic structure, and meaning. Standards create a spiraling curriculum throughout a learner's study, no matter the age or experience level. Here's a short video of just a few of our orchestra students from the initial by orchestra student Ian Black, who's in 11th grade.
Katie, are we able to get the audio?
I'm sorry, I'm not getting any sound either.
I sure hope so. I can try presenting from my end.
You guys are able to hear?
There we go.
Steve, you might have to go on mute if you get feedback.
Yeah.
Don't think this is
Okay.
working, so
It's,
Could I give
yeah,
it a try
why don't we
from my
do
end?
that?
Okay.
We're not getting any video though.
Yep. Getting there. Okay.
Thank you. Jessica, are you still there? I see you down. Yeah. I have to unmute.
Yep, I'm still here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. That was awesome once we got the video and the audio going together. That was really terrific. Any board members have any questions for Jessica?
It's Krista. I would just really like to applaud Photo for all their support and our orchestra staff and students. We are a leader here, and I just want to, I know my son has had Kay and all her cohorts. You guys are just so creative, and you've persevered through this by being so unique. And who knew we'd get some Dear Evan Hansen tonight, which was great.
No kidding. Yeah. Bonus time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. As a father of a music teacher, I know how much work goes into delivering a musical education. And I don't think a whole lot of people have that insight into the standards and how much work it goes in, just like every other teacher in our district, to applying standards to the education of music to our students and how hard that is. And that was just a glimpse of how they do it. And so our students go through learning those standards, and instead of taking a test, we get beautiful music out of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, we appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Thank you.
We go to E2, opening of school update, and this is a regular agenda item that we have to get an update from Dr. Bergstrom on school update and opening plans for the 2021 school year. So the table is yours, Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. I just have to comment, that was delightful to watch a student's progression, to watch students at every stage of standards mastery. I thought that was great, so I really appreciated that last report. Related to our update, tonight we'll be talking a little bit about the impact of emergency order number 10. Of course, we'll talk about equity and student supports, phased restart status, the results of our survey, and then the actionable steps related to the items that you see listed. And we know our goal, it's to have our kids back in school. So first we'll talk a little bit about emergency order number 10. As Andrew mentioned, it came right before, I think the day before practice was supposed to begin, or it might've been the morning that practice was supposed to be that evening. And it was amazingly disappointing that our students wouldn't be able to start the way we had planned. But we were grateful that at least some of our students had the opportunity to be in person for that very first night before the order went into effect. So they were able to talk about it with their coach and have discussions on what it means and the safety protocols that they'll use when they're able to gather again. And then our other sports did that virtually during the next week. So just wanted to remind people that emergency order number 10, an order is actually a requirement. So it's not something that is just recommended to us or guidelines offered to us. It is an actual requirement. And then the impact that all of Order 10 has on our school buildings and facilities. As I mentioned, winter sports practices are temporarily halted, but we hope they will begin after the order is lifted. We had to make some adjustments to the pool as we couldn't have any pre-scheduled classes in the pool or any athletic team practices in the pool. But what we were able to do is individual lap swims and open swims where people from different households are kept separate. There are a lot of rules to it all, and we went back and forth with public health. And I was really grateful for Deb Bossingham and Mike Carr's leadership in it. So we're hoping that it's a temporary setback that helps us get to where we need to be so that not only can we have sports practices, but we can also bring more students in for in-person instruction. So you know, for support services on the orange side, you see the things that are already happening. And Chloe earlier mentioned the OHS Hope Squad and the presentation that they were able to be a part of last week. And then for on the white side of the screen, you see the things that are new since the last time I gave an update to the board. And that is the student survey and the well check was complete. And remember, that was for grades 5 through 12. And the follow-up is in process. And I'll certainly give you more information on that in a little bit. Also, we know that our next step is to implement another survey that has the opportunity for caregivers to give their input. Because remember, the survey that went to students in grades 5 through 12, it was just gathering their input. So now we want to find another opportunity to ask our caregivers what they think and what type of supports they think their students need. So we'll start with grades 3 and 7, and then we'll add grades as we go. So I think all of you who are watching this are at least somewhat familiar with the numbers that are updated every Thursday evening, right around 5:30 or so. And the update is on the 14-day average. And if you remember, just a very short while ago, I think we were all appalled when our 14-day average was over 100. And you can see we're far, far beyond that. However, as was mentioned in many of the letters tonight, scientists are continuing to learn more and more about virus transmission. And so the metrics that you see below from Minnesota, Harvard, CDC, and the public health metrics are in the process of revision in order to reflect the latest information that science has to offer. So I can expect that we'll be seeing some updated guidelines sometime in December, and we'll be able to make some solid decisions utilizing those guidelines. As far as community transmission, I am relieved to see that Brooklyn isn't number 2, because for several weeks in a row, as far as municipalities in Dane County that has had a significantly higher rate of cases than the overall Dane County rate, Brooklyn was on there for a few weeks running. Right now you see that Fitchburg is there. But an interesting and not pleasant side note is that there are a few communities that had, while their rate wasn't significantly higher than Dane County, their rate had grown significantly compared to the week before. And Oregon was listed as one of those communities. In that list was Black Earth, Cross Plains, Madison, and Oregon. Move forward so you know how that looks here with us in our buildings and in our with our staff and with our students. So as of Friday at noon, We didn't have any positive cases of staff members who were working in schools. And we had 4 positive student cases for students who are present in schools right now. So that would be our 4K through 2 population, or students who are at learning hubs, or students with IEPs who are receiving in-person services. We have 17 staff members in quarantine and 46 students who are in quarantine. And the students in quarantine, that's out of, I think we have 618 who attend school 4K through 2. Doesn't include learning hubs or students receiving special education services. And thankfully, right now, we don't have any students online due to classroom closure. I think the last time I gave an update, we had some 4K students who were online due to classroom closure, and thankfully that has passed. So since the very beginning, I think we've had, the very beginning of the school year, we've had 184 students who have been in quarantine, and 17 students have tested positive. And remember, that's just what we know, because if a student is receiving virtual services, whether they're in Oregon online or they're in a grade where they have selected phased restart, but their grade hasn't moved into in-person yet, we don't necessarily know whether or not there are positive cases in that population. So you're very familiar with our phased reopening plan, and we're hoping to be able to get some information very soon that gives us much more clear guidance related to when we can bring in our next phase of students. So in order to prepare for that, so that we're ready when it happens, I mentioned last time that we needed some additional staffing, that due to the fact that there were staff members who were in quarantine, that means that there are staff members who aren't present to instruct our students or support their needs in a variety of ways. And so to be prepared for reopening or phasing in more grades to in-person, we absolutely have to have a deeper substitute pool. While the pool, we've usually had really quite an excellent pool of substitutes, people for the most part who live in our community and are very devoted substitutes. And many of them have currently taken a position with us as other people are on leave for a variety of reasons. And then there's also some substitutes who are really willing to be virtual but don't want to be in person. And there's actually a couple where it's vice versa. But in actuality, it's very difficult to find a substitute when there is a staff absence. Consequently, principals are covering classes, and we're doing all kinds of creative things to ensure the adults are present and we're able to keep our schools open and keep our students safe. But we have put out an all call for paraprofessional positions that are being hired and substitutes through WeCan and through Facebook. We've had 3 applicants in the month of November. And so we're continuing to look for new ways to put this out to our community, asking our community to share posts so that they're able to spread the word on the fact that we would love to have more people applying for open positions. And we'll have an ad in the Observer next week. In addition, we're increasing our nursing time because we know that there will be a significant need for contact tracing when we add in our next wave of students. So then that gets to the action step. What do we need to do, or what do families need to do to prepare for that? Well, from the week of the 7th, December 7th through 11th, we'll send out an informational video for families that gives them an idea of what second semester will look like. You know that Dr. Anderson and Mr. Pleiner talked a little bit at a previous board meeting related to what the middle school and the high school would look like when our phased restart students begin to come back into the building. So we want to refresh people's memory so that they have a really good idea of what school will look like and what safety measures will be in place, so that they can begin to select for semester 2 if they want to be in Oregon Online or phased restart, because we're committed to continuing to offer Oregon Online for as long as our families need it this year. I know that there will be some families who are currently in phased restart who may switch over and some who are in online who may switch to phased restart. We know that because that happened when we made our first move. When we brought in our 4K2s, we had families changing their decision in both directions. But we want to be able to wait until that week in December to ask you so that you really have as much information as possible related to how well Dane County is doing in reducing community transmission, because I know that's very important in a lot of people's selections. We need to know because we want to make our cohort groupings fairly well balanced, and we also have to prepare for transportation. We're asking people when we send out the selection form to let us know whether or not their student will be riding a bus so that we can begin putting our transportation routes together. And our hope is certainly to have more grades in school for in-person instruction second semester. I feel very confident that that will happen. And then for, oh, didn't move, I'm sorry. The next thing is the winter sports update. So I mentioned a little bit of this previously, so I won't spend too much time on it. But thankfully, our students in girls basketball and hockey, they were able to have a face-to-face meeting before the order went into effect. The other winter sports had virtual first meetings, but the focus, whether in person or virtual, was discussing the season, the expectations for practice related to safety measures, and just generally getting to know one another so that they're beginning to develop a community that will pay off when they can actually be face-to-face again and the order is lifted. So we hope practices will resume as early as possible post the lifting of the order. Students should expect details to come directly from their coaches. And as far as an action step, we plan on having a student athlete leadership meeting. And I'll talk a little bit more about student leadership in just a moment and how important it is to everything that's happening in our schools. So I wanted to go back and share a little bit of information regarding the family survey and how we have been utilizing the information our families shared with us in the survey. I gave a very brief update last time, so I want to talk or give some examples as to how it's being used now. Because every school has a plan for the utilization of their survey results, and they're reporting, they're sending in updates as far as what action steps are resulting from the information in the surveys. So here's one example. And this example is the question, my child is academically challenged at school. Just making sure that's the correct one. Yes. And you'll see that the responses for the grade bands, we broke it up by K2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. You can see that it is the parents of our youngest students who are more likely to indicate that they don't believe their child is being academically challenged. So all of this has been looked at big scale. So what did our parents tell us in the broadest terms, and then broken down by grade levels, and then principals are taking the data for their particular school and breaking it down by grade level with the staff so that they can analyze the data together and come to conclusions and develop action plans together. So as an example, the middle column is specifically addressing adding more academic challenge. So some of the things that have been reported as outcomes based on this data is that we're working to provide academic extension opportunities for all students. And we've got some really go-get-em people who are assigned to this. So I'm expecting we'll start seeing some really great things. We're actually utilizing a new tool. Students have had it for a while. However, we have upgraded our version just a bit to allow for some newer features. It's called, honestly, how you pronounce the name is up for debate, whether it's News ELA or Newsella or a whole bunch of other ways to pronounce it. The point is our students in grades 5 through 8 are already very familiar with it, and now they get a few added features. So what it does is it allows a teacher to take a news article and have the same content, but have it printed out or have it shared with students at multiple reading levels, so that students don't have to all be at the exact same reading level to have an engaging, rigorous discussion related to the article. And now it added the feature where it's also able to do that for more textbook-like experiences. So we know that we're able to ensure that there is rigor in everything we're offering, no matter the student's reading level. And then finally, principals, as I mentioned previously, are working with grade levels to identify these opportunities through the disaggregation of the data. There's been a lot of cross-checking. So if a student's family answered this, are they in Oregon Online, or are they in phased restart? And what other things are we noticing about people who are consistently saying there's not enough challenge here, so that we can come up with some really targeted solutions for the feelings that are being expressed. So you'll also notice that we're creating opportunities for more social interaction. All of the updates coming from the principals have included more clubs and activities. I think RCI, gosh, I'll have to check on the statistic, but they went up by over 10 clubs in what they're offering on Wednesdays, which is exciting because that means that we have kids engaged in something they find really interesting when they may have more time on a Wednesday compared to other days. A lot of open study halls so kids can do work together, more breakout rooms, more special interest groups, a lot of lunch bunches where counselors or teachers are inviting students and a couple of their friends to have virtual lunches with them, so that they're getting an opportunity to know one another and providing a socialization experience. And then finally, making connections with students who are struggling, mostly through direct outreach. Believe me, these systems have been in place since the beginning of the year. The survey simply gave us more students that we want to check in on, because we're cross-referencing the list of students whose parents said that they were struggling with the list of students that we already knew were having some challenges with this format. And then we're doing individual invitations to special interest groups. When we know our students well enough, we know what might be kind of exciting and what would pique their interest. We're providing assignment checklists for students who are having a hard time staying organized, which is a really hard thing to do when you're a middle level, meaning grades 5 through 8 student, and a lot of those organizational skills haven't been solidified yet. And we're extending invitations to the learning hubs. So now for the student survey. It was really terrific to hear from our students and understand a little bit about what they had to tell us. But you'll notice that the response rate is 80%, which for a survey is really good, right? That getting an 80% response rate on a survey is good. However, when you see, as it's broken down by grades, 5 through 12, you'll notice that our oldest grades, grades 11 and grades 12, had the least number of responses to the survey. And I think that might be an indication of what Chloe mentioned earlier, is that the older kids, it's harder to keep, perhaps harder to keep them engaged when this might be for seniors their last year. But overall, a good response rate, but just keep in mind the 80% because that comes in as an important factor in just a moment. So as far as the online experience, our parents and our students are, in relative agreement. 77% of our students felt that the overall experience is somewhat better or much better than last spring. So for us, understanding the why behind the 23% who don't feel it's better, that's really important. So we're looking for themes in the short answer or the open-ended responses. And we'll be working with some focus groups to try to better understand what we could do to improve the experience for some of our students. And that'll come out just a little bit when we talk about themes too. So as far as classroom logistics, you'll see that thankfully our students, 100% of them are okay with accessing their online classroom. And then they really also know who to ask when they need help. Now, similar to parents, who to ask when they need some help with their Chromebook, that's less evident. So similar to what we told you a couple of weeks ago regarding the parent or the family survey, we're going to make sure there's continuous messaging on where students can go to get help for their Chromebook or their tablet. The next slide is very interesting. It shows what the parents said about real-time learning and what the students said about it. So the students, for the most part, feel like the mark is being hit with real-time learning or synchronous learning. And as far as the asynchronous learning, just a touch more of our students felt like it was just right, but parents and students seem to agree. A certain percentage of parents and students, 24%, thought it was too much independent time. Otherwise, there are a lot of students who felt like we're getting pretty close with what we're expecting with that also. Now, mind you, all of these survey results are minus 20%, and that 20% is more heavily weighted in grades 11 and 12. So I always have to keep that in mind when looking at the results. Particularly when you think about academically challenged, we notice that our students, 91% of them in grades 5 through 12 answered that they feel academically challenged. However, for us, 9% is still too many students. So we're going to be doing similar to what we mentioned before, deep dives by grade level and by school, and follow up and modify based on the findings. And as I mentioned, there have been a lot of changes made on the family survey, and I think we'll be tweaking even more based on what our students just told us. So getting to the relationships piece. So this is when Erica Munding, our communications director, looked at these identical numbers, she checked 3 or 4 times because she and I were shocked that our parents and our students said the exact same thing about relationship with at least one teacher from school. Percentages were exact. However, and this is very interesting, when we asked the students if there is at least one adult that they can talk to if they're struggling with something, then that percentage shot up to 95%. So it really, once again, to me, this begs for a focus group, because I really wonder how students are interpreting the word relationship. Because as an adult, one might think that if someone feels comfortable enough to come to you when they're struggling, that there is a positive relationship. But that might not be how the students are thinking about it. So you can see there's a little bit of a disconnect with that, but it's a positive one in the sense that it's really, really good to see that 95% of our kids feel they can come to an adult at school. Now, as always, I go to, what about the 5%? Who are they going to when they need help? So this is the type of response that really allows us to follow up individually with students and with families to get a better understanding. And when this question, the relationship with at least one teacher from school, when that was dissected down to the grade level at a particular building, that's when you started to get some creative solutions related to new clubs or interest groups or lunch bunches or something to ensure that we were providing as many opportunities for connection as we possibly could. Check-in requests. So in the survey we sent to students in grades 5 through 12, we asked them, would you like a school counselor, administrator, or principal? Administrator and principal is pretty much the same thing, but kids might not think of it that way, so we use both words. To connect with you to discuss any questions or concerns. And you can see that most students said no, but enough students said maybe and yes, so that our student services staff members who are school counselors, school psychologists, social workers, those are the people who are just the heroes of connection. And they are reaching out to our students first, the students who indicated yes, and next to the students who indicated maybe. And you'll notice that our students in grade 5 had the most number of yeses and maybes. And it's very interesting that in other parts of the survey, they had the most number of I don't knows or in betweens. So we're not sure what we'll find when we connect with our students and talk to them about what they're thinking and feeling, if maybe there are some common themes, or if students just weren't really sure when they were asked a question like that, so they went for what's in the middle. I guess we'll find out when we have some of these really important questions. Now, this number, when you look down at the grade levels, 7 seniors said that they wanted someone, I want someone to contact me. When you go back to the number of students who are accessing student services in a regular school year when we aren't virtual, it makes me think about the 20% we're not hearing from. And there is a disconnect between the number of students who wanted to check in and the number of students who on average connect in with our students, our school counselors. So I think that we need to do some work to dig into who didn't answer the survey and how are we going to do some outreach to that particular group, in addition to the students who are here. So our action steps, I've mentioned most of them already, but the check-ins have already started, and they will continue through the week of December 7th, and then we'll be comparing themes. Of course, when students and counselors have conversations, those are confidential. That isn't anything that is shared with any of the principals or someone in my position. However, unless of course there's a health and safety issue. But big broad themes, for instance, if we were to discover that through the course of a lot of the conversations that counselors were having with students, that we were seeing a larger number of students with anxiety than we would see in a normal year. I am just making that up as an example. Then that would be a theme that we would plan around. And we'll report on themes or general things that we saw or we heard in our contacts with students at the December 14th board meeting. So when we asked our students what's working well, they had some great things to tell us. Flexibility was a pretty big one. We've been talking for a very long time about how learning is the constant and time is the variable, and how do we help our students gain some flexibility in how they think about things when we have a day that, a bell rings and you get up and move, whether you're done or you're not done. So students enjoy this, the flexibility piece. Not saying that they would prefer to be virtual as opposed to being in school. I'm just saying that our older students are appreciating the flexibility. Some of our students mentioned in the open-ended responses that they really like to be at home, and you see a large number of reasons why there. There was an expressed appreciation for Wednesdays because they're able to sleep a little later, catch up on work. This was especially prevalent at the high school level, and that they saw it as a time to ask individual questions. There was an expressed appreciation for real-time learning and breakout sessions, especially the respondents in grades 11 through 12 spoke about how much they appreciated the block schedule and having fewer classes at once. And then the fact that it was more organized and communication is better than it was in the spring, that was mentioned too. But the interesting thing is when you look at what's challenging, it's some of the same things, or it's an equal number of students saying that the same thing is challenging to them. So the number one thing, homework and assignments. Similar to parents, more clarity on instructions, due dates, etc. More time for assignments. Fewer assignments came up for grades 7 through 12. And our intermediate level students had some mixed feelings on the amount of homework that was assigned. The high school students really spoke about real-time classes and how sometimes they felt like they had too many at once, and that some of them were too long, which is interesting because that's a part of the block schedule that another group said that they really appreciated. So you're finding that two sides of the coin seen here in the responses of the students, similar to the responses of the caregivers. Definitely wanted more socialization, interaction with their teachers, interaction with their peers, And they would like to see some restructuring of the real-time classes, perhaps more movement, opportunities for even more interaction, and somehow they want to be able to have less screen time, which I think is pretty amazing that they're recognizing that. And it comes out again because we also asked our students about healthy habits and what healthy habit, if they could implement a healthy habit, one healthy habit starting tomorrow, what would they implement? And here's the list of the biggest number, or the ideas or practices that had the largest number. So well-balanced diet, more exercise, going to bed earlier, and getting more sleep, which we know from research for our teens is extremely important. Interesting, drinking more water, mental health, and less screen time, less time on phones, computers, gaming systems, and TV. So once again, that really showed us that our students have a very firm grasp on screen time and its impact on them, because they didn't just talk about school and classes, they talked about all the other ways the screen time is a part of their life. So our action steps, I'll just sum it up. We'll be following up, and we have started following up with individual students. We'll have student feedback groups so we can dig into some of these things that we want to really have a better understanding of. And our staff survey closed this morning. We had just under 400 responses, and we'll present that at our next board meeting also. So now I want to talk a little bit about our medical working group. Very excited to say that almost all of the members that we invited to be a part of the group have responded to us, and perhaps some even have while I've been sitting here. But you know that the purpose is this, because we've shared that at a couple of different meetings now. And amazingly, we had 55 highly qualified professionals offer their services. Really, we would have been proud to work with any one of them. There were some very talented and well-credentialed people who offered their services to us. And so making that final selection was challenging, but you can see what we did here is that we broke it up into the areas of expertise that we knew we needed. Epidemiology, family practice medicine, and we're hoping to add one person to that group. Public health, nursing, data analysis, we're hoping to add one person there too. Social work, and mental health. So if you take a look at the members of our committee, and when all is said and done, I think we'll have 15 or 16, plus myself, Krista Flanagan, and Tim LeBrun. So we have quite an amazing group assembled who have agreed to be a part of this working group, and we're really looking forward to working with them. And so you can see, we'll go back to our goals. Working on the goals that have been set out for the medical working group, and coming up with improvements to how we can continue to keep our schools as safe as possible, and review the data that is necessary to make the best possible decisions. So I won't go over every single person, but we'll certainly share this information via the weekly update and the website. And as I mentioned, of all 55 of the people who applied, we would have been proud to work with any of them. So now I'll go back to this. Sorry, one more thing. You'll notice that our first meeting is next week, Monday, November 30th. So for an equity update, I hope you know that we will have an equity update at every one of the board meetings, because it is one of our highest priorities to create an equitable educational environment. And so we want to make sure that we're putting this at the forefront in every possible opportunity. So I'll speak about a few things. Student, family, and community education related to the anti-hate speech policy implementation, and some next steps for a curriculum review process. Well, one of the great things that we have coming up is our second community forum in partnership with Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development. It will be on December 1st at 7 p.m. It's a virtual event focusing in on how to interrupt racism. So we have publicized it via email to our parents, social media, on our website. We'll continue to publicize it because it's really helpful if you register. Because when you register, then Nehemiah sends you the link to join the meeting. So you can see that there's a link in this presentation, but most importantly, it was sent out in the family update on Friday, and it will be sent out again tomorrow because our weekly family update will go out tomorrow. Now, as far as action steps for the anti-hate speech policy implementation, as you know, there was a group of teachers and parents who worked together this summer to create an implementation plan for the anti-hate speech policy. And that group met 4 times, and then the schools did their very first lesson. We did professional development for all of our teachers related to the policy. Schools did initial introduction to the policy, and now we're moving into our next phase, which is helping students to understand why we have the policy and the role that each one of us plays in ensuring we have a welcoming and inclusive school system. So we had a meeting with a couple of our student groups today, which was when I mentioned student leadership before, as exemplified by Chloe and Andrew. And we had another great example today. Mr. Pleiner and the rest of the high school administration, as well as Mr. Tanner, met with our representatives from our Multicultural Student Union, as well as our Allies in Action group, which are both groups serve a very similar purpose. They're very devoted to creating an equitable educational environment. So meeting with them today and hearing about the hate speech policy from their point of view and how absolutely energized they are to be a part of the solution. They absolutely want to be a part of the lesson creation for our students. And as was mentioned by Chloe previously, MSU is already doing a great job with aspects of that. And so they want to be involved in lessons that come out around the anti-hate speech policy also. So our young leaders really, they're very inspirational. And I come across it over and over again, whether it's our student athlete leaders or our MSU and Allies in Action leaders, or it's our own student council reps here who meet with us every other week with the board meetings. We have some pretty amazing young people who are going to really do their part to make sure that the world is continuing to get better for everyone. So we met with them this week, today, and learned a lot about how they could be helpful. But in the other schools, lessons are being designed by cross-district teacher teams that are specific to grade level bands. They're focusing on what can a student do to create a culture of safety and belonging. And the lessons begin, I believe, the week of November 30th. Now, we know that parents want to be involved in this and they want to know what's happening too. So we'll have multiple opportunities to communicate with our parents related to the anti-hate speech policy. Because one thing is never enough, it has to be multiple opportunities. So at the community forum on December 1st, I'll have an opportunity to do an introduction and I'll connect some of that to expectations related to the anti-hate speech policy. We'll have a Q&A session for families who want to know more, and we'll be continually sending information in our weekly information updates. So we have multiple opportunities to communicate with our families and make sure that they very much feel that we are all on the same page as far as what's happening in our schools and where we want to go next. The anti-hate speech implementation task force, the one that met 4 times this summer, they're meeting again on December 2nd. They will take a look at all of the lessons that have been developed for the grade bands of K2, 3-5, or is it 3-5, 6-8, 9-12, and they'll look at it as part of a scope and sequence. The lessons are really based on the teaching tolerance social justice standards, and we're looking specifically at identity. And what does identity mean to people? and how, what are the things that we identify with. So just to give you an idea about what some of the lessons look like, because the high school lessons are still being made, which is perfect because our students will be a part of it. But for grades 4K through 2, one example, and I think we pulled this beautiful slide that's on the screen right now, and it's the one with the rainbow colors and it says names in the corner. We pulled that from, I think it was the second or third lesson. And we pulled it because one of the things that they're talking about as young learners is different ways, different things that we identify with, things that tell us about who we are. And this is an example of a story, and it's Your Name is a Song, about a little girl whose name was constantly being mispronounced, and how her mom taught her about the musicality of names. Because with our youngest learners, reading stories is one of the best ways to open up discussions and get students thinking. For our students in grades 3 through 5, you'll see the identity tree, which basically there are things that are above the ground, parts of your identity that other people see, and then there are parts of your identity that other people don't know, the things that are inside you, like your perspectives and your experiences and your beliefs. So helping students understand that there are two parts to their identity. And then just one example from the middle school is they had a really cool lesson about one way that a community can express identity is through community murals. And they had some beautiful community mural examples from around the world. Now, the lessons are much more in-depth and complex. I just wanted to give you a small taste of the type of things that our students are talking about. And everything that's discussed is then brought back to what is your role in creating a culture where everyone feels they belong. Now, a next step related to equity is our discussion about a curriculum review process. I mentioned in the past that we're in the process of talking to some consultants related to utilizing a formal structure that someone can come in and help us to facilitate. But there's also many things that we're doing on our own. And one of them is through our partnership with Dane County Equity Consortium. As you know, we're members of the consortium. And this year, there is a focus on action research related to an equity question. And so one of the things that we wanted to focus on as a team who attends the Dane County Equity Consortium is the impact of our universal curriculum on students' sense of belonging in a school community, and what changes that are made, what has a direct result, what directly results in increased sense of belonging for students. So we're in the early stages of ensuring we have a solid question, and then we'll be all about planning for the implementation of how will we find out what changes are making a difference for our students. Because as one of the students very wisely said in the meeting from this morning, a lot of people can think things are happening, but if the students don't know or don't feel that it's happening, then it's not making that much of a difference. And that caused me a huge internal smile, because that is something that I say all the time, that if the students don't feel it, then we need to rethink what we're doing. You'll see this picture of a person engaging in a long and winding path. And I wanted to point that out because you'll see that that pathway has lots of detours, lots of opportunities to turn around, double back, and go forward again. And that's really important when we're talking about our journey in creating a more equitable educational environment for our kids. There isn't something where we can say, if we do steps 1, 2, and 3, that will make a difference. It's many things happening simultaneously and orchestrated together that will make a difference. And sometimes we'll go down a road and we'll find out that this is not the road that's going to make the biggest impact, and we're going to go back and we're going to do a different road. And that's just the idea that the journey isn't linear. And that's one of the things that we were urged to think about at the Dane County Equity Consortium, that creating a more equitable school experience is not a step 1, step 2, step 3 process. It is full of lots of starts and stops, with our students always at the center of every decision we make along the way. And I think that is it for this evening.
Thank you, Leslie. We'll go through as our typical process to ask any questions and provide any comments. I'll walk through, I think I'll go seniority tonight. Kevin.
No questions for me. Thanks for the presentation, the update.
Heather.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Leslie, for that. That's a lot of information. The one question I had was on the staffing needs. Do you have a sense, and obviously it will be more clear after the December 7th to 11th timeframe, but do you have a sense of, based on K through 2 right now, what it would look like if, when all grades are back, what our needs are or will be?
I have a feeling that many of the people who are in Oregon Online will stay in Oregon Online. So
Right.
I'm not expecting we'll have a lot of switch from that, actually.
Yep. And so then in terms of staffing, when you're talking about looking for subs, do you have a sense of what our need is?
Yeah, absolutely. We could probably have at least 2 people showing up to every school every day and still be struggling. But it really depends on who has to quarantine. So it fluctuates a lot. But honestly, two people at every school would at least begin to make a dent.
Okay, thanks. That's it for me, Steve.
All right, Anna and then Tim.
2 questions. The first, do we have an estimate on the number of kids or students who are using the learning hubs? I mean, do we know, I know we talked about, are we at capacity? Are we not at capacity? And how does that look? And how does Executive Order 10 change the number of people that are allowed? So I guess I'm curious to get a little bit more detail on the learning hub situation.
Thank you for asking that question, because I should have mentioned that previously, and that is Emergency Order number 10 had no impact on instruction and what we were able to do with instruction. So all of our schools are continuously increasing the number of students who are receiving services through the learning hubs, and it varies day by day because there are very few students who come in and stay there all day. It's usually they come in a couple of times a week. So the numbers vary. Do we have increasing capacity? Yes. It becomes more concerning, let's say at the elementary level, when we bring in more grades, because, as I mentioned, if we don't add some additional staff to support things like staff who need to be gone for quarantine, it'll be very difficult to staff a learning hub, because we'll have to have the person who's in the learning hub actually in the classroom that has no teacher. So that's one of the reasons that increasing the number of substitutes and paraprofessionals that we're hiring right now is so critical.
Okay, thank you. My second question is really related to planning for semester 2. I know that there was recently a decision that we were bringing kids in for some of the tech ed or hands-on classes. I guess I'm hoping that in semester 2, we're able to continue to bring in those small groups in that same fashion, because I think that's really critical for those particular classes and for that type of education. So can you?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Great. And those were really the only questions I had. Great information, a lot to take in, and thank you so much for all of the great work to put all of this together. It's really helpful for us.
Tim.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bergstrom, for the overview. It is a lot of information. There's lots going on without question. A couple of questions. Do you have a sense from the very beginning, kids with IEPs are receiving in-person services? And that could be daily, that could be a couple of times a week, it could be once a week. Do you have a sense of what % of our kids are in that category?
The number of students who are currently receiving in-person services and have an IEP?
Yes.
Okay. No, I don't, but I know who does. I think that Candace is here, and I think she'd be able to answer that question better than I could. So Candace, I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have a general sense as far as numbers go?
I don't have a general sense of percentage. I could say, that we have probably I would say around 10 kids per elementary building, probably maybe about 15 at room corners. I think the principals would know better than that. And there's probably actually fewer than that at the middle school, maybe 10 to 15 at the middle school, and probably 15 to 20 at the high school. And they do come in for a variety of services. Some will just come in for some speech and PT. Some will come in for longer periods of time to get help with academics in addition to some of the related services. So it's a variety of amounts of times and frequencies.
So all told, it sounds like about 100 kids out of the 4,000 kids we work with.
Yeah, that might even
Sounds
be a
about
little
right.
high, actually. Yeah.
Okay, all right. My second question is, I keep hearing about the education gap, and I'm wondering if we are benchmarking ourselves against districts near us, but outside of Dane County, to better understand, are we moving through subjects more slowly than we normally would because of the challenges associated with virtual versus in-person? Or are we moving through subjects at about the same pace, and we're just feeling like the absorption factor is less because of in-person versus virtual? So I'm just trying to get a sense of,
Sure.
I know there's a growing, it feels like there's a growing gap. Are we benchmarking ourselves?
Internally, but it's difficult to do it externally when we're not sure the status of state testing this year. There wasn't state testing last year. And we have made the decision to use a different literacy assessment this year because it's one that students can do in a computerized way because of difficulties in doing it otherwise. So we're definitely looking at the student to grow where they were last year and where they are now. We just had data meetings at every school in the month of November where we were looking specifically at that. How many students have grown, how many have stayed the same, and if there are any students who regressed. So we're doing all of that internally. I'm not sure at this moment how we would do it externally without being able to utilize state assessments in that. So we don't know the fate of state assessments this year for the state of Wisconsin, but we know that they were called off last spring.
Okay. What's your gut feel?
I think, yeah. I think that we're probably we're addressing fewer standards, but I think we're doing it in greater depth because part of the process that John Tanner and Darcy Krieger led and continue to lead is the identification of essential standards in all subject areas. So we can say, this is what we consider to be the most important, and making sure that we're spending our time on what we consider to be the most important. Not saying that we're ignoring the other standards, we're just putting emphasis on certain ones and going as deep as we can within those. Now, I'm not going to say that what students are experiencing virtual is the equivalent to what they would experience in person. I'm not saying that. So, but do I know that our kids are growing? Yes. Every child? No. But we struggle with that every year. Students whose growth stagnates, and how do you develop an individualized plan for those students? And we're in the process of doing it for all of our kids at the moment.
And I guess, and thank you for that. Again, I'm keep hearing those words, and it's more nationally than specifically in Dane County versus outside of Dane County. And I know that, students in their junior and senior years, as they're approaching the completion of, K through 12 education, are going to be thrown into the same buckets of kids who have been in person all year. And so that's where a great area of concern is for me, is that when, kids start plugging into college, next fall, for instance, are we putting them at a disadvantage? Either statewide or nationally. And what I'm hearing is we didn't test last year. We don't know where we're going to be for this year. 3 years in or 2 full years in, are we going to be shocked by where our kids are compared to, again, whether it's state or national testing? Are we going to be caught off guard when our kids finally do test and compare to the rest of the state or the rest of the country?
Well, one of the things that I think we can do is we can talk to some of the teachers who are teaching those upper grade level courses right now, right? And they know that they're preparing our students for college. And so I do think they'd be able to give us a very accurate assessment of the students that we're about to graduate, in 6 or 7 months, and where they think they are related to students who have had a more traditional experience in their senior year. So I really do trust their opinions. Whether or not we have testing to back that up, it'll be difficult to see. John Tanner just made an excellent point to me, and that is that AP tests remain the same. So advanced placement,
that'll be an indicator.
A very important indicator for us, yes.
Yeah. And those AP, when are the AP tests typically? I should know,
May.
but I don't.
They're in May. Mm-hmm.
All right. Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
John.
Troy.
Great. So my first item is really just a comment on the staffing, this hiring for substitutes. You noted that there were only 3 applicants in November, and that, to me, I guess that's a little bit alarming, because knowing that we're already short-staffed, and we've got to have, you mentioned principals covering classes when teachers are out for quarantine and things like that. As we continue to bring in more students, it just seems like we're going to need to have more and more substitutes. So I think that number of 3 applicants just is a little bit alarming to me in terms of being able to continue to staff through the increase in students.
It is to us too, Troy. And that's what I hear when I talk to colleagues who've had more grades in in-person instruction, that's their biggest challenge. And honestly, that's what shuts people down, is they don't have the staff to keep the school open. And then, another thing that I think related to Tim's question is a curiosity about the impact of the in and out, as opposed to the impact of consistency. I'm not sure which one will have more of a positive impact on our students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then my next question, I guess, is on contact tracing. So you talked about the increase in nursing hours for student contact tracing. I'm just curious if we need to put a higher level of staffing to help Gina with contact tracing for our staff.
Gina and I talk about this regularly, because there will come a point as we're bringing in more and more grades where she will definitely need some assistance with that. So we've created that plan of how we're going to provide her some additional assistance. Otherwise, all she would ever do every day, all day, was contact tracing. And we know that Gina has a lot of duties that are very important to our school district. So.
Right. Okay. So you've got that in the works.
Yeah.
And then going all the way back to the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned the research is changing every day. New studies are coming out, and we all know that. We're watching that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, there have been some new items coming out from Harvard, and I guess I haven't seen anything from CDC, but Harvard issued a new statement about trying to keep schools open as a higher prioritization. But I have not seen the indicators change yet from anywhere. And so we know that other districts are just ignoring the indicators, or other counties are ignoring the indicators. So I guess I'm just kind of looking for verification that indicators have not changed yet.
No, not yet. No, do I expect that may happen in the future? Yes, but they haven't yet.
Okay.
And the continuous message is that students being in school should be a priority. And we absolutely agree. There's absolutely nothing to disagree with related to that message. But then usually buried in the interview or the article, it's school should be a priority when community transmission is low. And that seems to be a theme over and over. And it's not necessarily because schools are transmission points. It's that schools, although there's some people say that's not conclusive yet, particularly for the high school level, but let's just set that aside. But it's also about schools will reflect the community. So that'll be the number of adults that are positive or need to quarantine, the number of students who are positive or need to quarantine. We will simply reflect what's happening. And I think we see that already.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Krista. Krista?
We can't hear you, Krista.
Man, Krista disappeared. She might be signing on. We'll give her a second to come back on.
There she is.
There she is. Are you back? 1, 2. Krista, can you say something? No?
Shoot.
Oh, okay. I'll come back. I'll jump in with my comments, okay, and then we'll come back through this. Thanks for the information, Leslie. One thing that I would really be interested to hear the information from your medical group is so many of the information that we're getting about the impact of COVID-19 relates to mortality rates. And I see very little information broadcast that talks about other health conditions and its impact on people, and particularly kids, whether they're symptomatic or asymptomatic. And just over the weekend, I saw a number of anecdotal studies coming forth about that. And I would be interested to hear from that group and you see how that factors in, because that's always been a concern of mine, is it's just not assessing mortality rates, because we know those affect older folks like myself more than students. But there's growing evidence that there's some significant health risks to students, and I'd be interested in how your guys look at that as well. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks, and if board members, you haven't heard from me, it's because I've been reflecting and looking at all the information we got, including all the emails we got and the survey stuff. And I went back and reviewed our board papers, because I think it's important for us and our role in this board governance situation that we have with policy governance as our model is to look out 3 to 5 years into 30,000 feet up. And that means taking a look at where we're going to go. I mean, we've got the plan in terms of when we come back. We, with the metrics, and Leslie working with that, and the medical board looking at that sort of stuff. So to me, I'm very comfortable with where we're at as a district. And some of the questions that Tim asked go to the points that I think we as a board need to look at and through visioning in the next month or so. Okay. And I think Tim, I think it's really, I think it's too early to make a comment that that there's a gap there. I mean, that's a concern, obviously, and we've asked that for a period of time, and we'd rather have some in-person education, if not, a more significant role of that. But to me, I think it's yet to be determined what the gaps are, and where we're headed with that. I mean, back in 2007, our board wrote that our educational delivery system is flawed. And we've spent the last 13 years before COVID-19 looking at ways to improve our educational system and delivery because we weren't satisfied with where we were at, that there were signs of structural issues there and faults in terms of student motivation and willingness to learn. And you know, for example, when we were looking at changing the grading system, you know, one of the concerns was, well, they're not going to do the work. Well, that raises a fundamental question of why aren't they going to do that? Okay, why wouldn't they do it under our traditional system? And so I think what we're forced into the situation that we don't want to be in, but you know, we would be really remiss if we didn't look at this hard from a different lens and say, how can we learn from this so that when COVID-19 goes away and we have an opportunity to go back to a different model, are we just going to go back to the same model that we had problems with, that we were trying to address at that time through studying Rickaball's work on the 5 levers and working with our leadership teams? What are we going back to with the motivation thing? I was, you know, Leslie, when you said, you know, learning should be the constant, time is the variable. I mean, and John Tanner, you remember this? And this was like 12 years ago. We had that on a manila folder when we were sitting down brainstorming that we got to move away from a model in which time is the constant and learning is the variable. And when I was reflecting over the comments we've got the last couple months, so much of it was focused on amount of time in class, you know, amount of time in education and instruction. The Wednesday break thing is that time was the most important measure in terms of whether our students were learning. And we had rejected that as a board 13, 14 years ago. And so it's going to be interesting. I was really looking at the data that you had today from the students on that point is like, what's the flexibility stuff is ringing true to what we had said 13 years ago. And we're starting to see that in terms of, okay, we're forced into virtual education. What's that learning about how we can structure that when we're able to go back in person, and what's that balance going to be? That was really interesting to see. I mean, we've talked about block. Every time we raised, you know, block classes over the last 20 years, I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, it's just because we're changing structure. But now when we're talking about block education in terms of learning, all of a sudden that debate has shifted. Okay, and there's a more willingness on the part of both our educators and our students to see that in a different light as opposed to changing structure. It's like helping a learning environment, you know, and it would be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of the information you've got. You know, the social emotional learning piece ties in with the whole child element that we've been working at. I mean, before we were forced into COVID land, we had significant problems with social emotional learning and mental health issues, to the point that we were investing up to $800,000 in our last budget before COVID-19 to address those concerns. And I don't think we really did it in a comprehensive means in terms of here we engaged that. Okay, we just knew we had that problem. With COVID-19, we're forced to answer those questions in terms of how's it affecting each kid. And the survey results were really interesting, Leslie, in terms of being able to look at how's that impacting that. And that all goes into what we were talking about was our ILPs. And that was Tim's question, was how many kids do we have on ILPs? You know, 16 years ago, I asked the question is, why do we have ILPs for only kids who have been identified with special needs? Why doesn't every student have a plan, okay, that we can move them through, okay? Sometimes I thought we got really comfortable in the fact that we had a school year that went from September to April or May or June, that we had 8 periods a day in the high school, and we were really comfortable moving through, and that by doing that, we assured that once they got 23 credits, they were ready to go, without really diving in deep. Now that that whole system's been thrown out, and Tim asked the right question, are there going to be gaps, or how are we doing with learning? I think this affords us an opportunity to look at the data from this delivery model system to see the strengths and weaknesses, compare them to the strengths and weaknesses of the system that was in place before we had COVID-19 and move forward. I just think it's a really good opportunity. It's the board's role in that visioning process to look at that stuff. I mean, that's the overall arching goal. And Troy, I would encourage the visioning committee to work with those questions because they've been in play, and this affords us an opportunity to look at them from a different lens. So kind of that's where my focus has been. I'm really comfortable as a board member and in my oversight role of seeing where you're taking us in terms of the immediacy right now and the current situation, and focusing on the health issues and how we operationally drive that. But from a board view, I think the policy opportunities are really great to, in the long term of moving the district forward, looking at the data we've got. So that's all I had. Krista, are you back with us now?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Oh,
Good.
sorry,
Thanks.
my earbuds died, so that's what sent everything.
Okay.
So I just have a couple broad things and some questions. I mean, this may sound odd, but I guess I'm feeling more optimistic at this meeting than I have in a long, long time, even though we're not in a good spot with COVID. Kind of what Steve has said and what Troy has said, I think this is a laboratory that we didn't want, and it's really going to inform our thinking moving forward. And there are things that we're doing and finding out about our students and how they learn and parents' involvement that we probably never would have had otherwise in terms of this depth because it's become emotional and really kind of in our face. So I guess my question is, as we look to this second semester, which let's put that out there, right? Like you did, Leslie, like that's kind of where we're focusing right now. In your opinion, are we ready? Are there things that you still need to work out, or are we ready for the systems that need to occur and the patterns and the plans that need to occur, that if we needed to start with everybody into our phase in 5/12, are we ready to go?
Well, we're ready as far as what we know what it'll look like. We know what the plans are. We know the safety procedures. We know our buildings and their HVAC systems. I mean, we're ready with all of that. Do we right now have enough substitutes to be able to get us through multiple quarantines? No, that's going to be a challenge. But we are also working on systems that we may need to develop because we know we won't have the adults we need. So what other systems might we be putting into place? And we're working on that too. So yes, we're absolutely ready now. Before I give any of my colleagues heart palpitations, I do understand that, transportation needs sometimes a couple of weeks of heads up to do their routes, right? And that's one of the reasons that we're doing the surveys in the beginning part of December.
So then I guess that leads into my next question, which is, contrary to some public opinion, I tend to challenge people. And so I guess based on what you said with subs or some of the, I wouldn't call it disinformation out there, but even from some of the letters tonight, we don't know that people are getting all of the information, that there are some things in these letters or things that we've heard from people or meetings that I've had recently that people don't have the whole picture of what is occurring with us or what's out there in the research. So I guess my question is, do we have, or is this something that could be part of a survey in the future? How are people getting information about what is school? Do we know how many families are accessing your information emails every week? Do we know how many people are going to the website? Because we need to be the driver of the accurate information and the complete information. And so do we have a sense, or can we ask it in a next survey, how many people are actually getting this information from the school district? Do we have a sense of that?
We don't now necessarily. I mean, there's always ways you can run programs and the number of people who go to websites, et cetera. But that isn't necessarily, I think, the driving factor for communication right now.
So that might be something as you go into this Q&A session in December, that we really need people to get their information from the source. Because I think we're starting to see, and I'm starting to continue to hear, that people have half-truths or they don't know all the things that we are doing or that are available to their students. And I guess, I would put a challenge out there to Let's Open Oregon Schools. You've now heard tonight ways that you can help us. Let's get on the same team. Get your group together and who can be subs. get your group together and get them to get the accurate information from the school district about all the things that we're doing to try and aim for the start of the second semester. Let's all have a community responsibility to get these numbers down so we can get our kids back in school. So I would throw that challenge out there to that group. Lastly, I just want to talk about equity for a minute. It was a great, things that we're doing are really good. I guess I would kind of based on what Steve said too with visioning, and I would throw that to us as a committee and Troy, that I would really like the board to have a role with equity in terms of what is the strategic plan here? What are the measurables we're looking at? You know, we deal in what, not in how, but what is our board role with what in terms of what are we trying to accomplish with our equity plan? Where are we right now? Where do we think we need to be? How are our students viewing where we are right now? Where do we need to be? Just like you heard from the students, is what we're doing making a difference? The board needs to have that question answered as well. That's our role. And so if that rests with visioning or rests with the full board, we have to have that I mean, that's a really important question to me of where we are right now, where do we want to go, and are we getting there? So I don't know, Leslie, if you have thoughts on that, and I know we've kind of broached that a little bit in visioning, and I know there's things that are taking our focus right now, but I really would encourage us to revisit that question pretty soon.
Yes, and that was the focus of my outreach for a couple of the different consultants that we have been working with, is to try to get some outside assistance in developing the equity arm of our strategic plan that we can then use as the roadmap for developing the other components of it.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah. Did that trigger any questions? Sorry, I was on mute. Did that trigger any questions from anybody, you know, going through that once, or comments?
Yeah, just one comment. I mean, just to, I guess, reiterate what several board members have said. You know, I think we do have to take a good look at this item of stop start. I guess I've always had it in my head that stop start is bad, right? That we want to maintain consistency, and I think so far we've done well with our students that are in school, our K2s. We haven't had to do the stop start yet. And so I think we've been successful, but I think it is something that we just probably need to consider very thoroughly about how, you know, what's our appetite for having a stop start situation as we start to ramp up again.
I think that's a very good point. I think, you know, perfect would be great, but better done than perfect sometimes, in my opinion. And I am not, again, I'm not talking about let's get all our kids back in school, but, you know, I keep hearing about Milton and Janesville schools. And yep, there are days when they announce 2 schools are going back to virtual until Thanksgiving. But, you know, they have a lot more schools in Janesville than 2 schools. And so I know that there may be times when schools, you know, push ahead and have to step back for a period of time once they understand what's going on within their school. But, you know, we heard it from Chloe, and that, you know, there was a lot of excitement around one practice before 10 came down. And I think that's just a small indicator of how important it is to get our kids together and to get them with their coaches or with their teachers, or just with their friends. So I agree that, you know, it'd be nice to be perfect, but, you know, we may have to inch into this and take a step back every once in a while, just to adjust.
I guess what I would say to that is we still can't forget the safety aspect, that we can't go full bore into this without being conscious of our responsibility as a community member, and that we need subs because what people want is a better education for their kids. And so we have to be saying that we can deliver that in a way that is to our, I'm not saying to our standards, but to Troy's question, I'm not sure in and out is better than being in and making sure that we can stay in. And so I think it's a broader question than just saying, hey, let's do everything we can to just start more kids in school. That's a complex question. That we
And
can't.
I would agree with that. I would totally agree with that. But I want to take a look at the kids that we have in school right now. And they've never, I don't think they've ever met the criteria, but they're in school. They're still operating in school outside of the criteria that Dane County laid out. And that is even with the last 3 weeks when rates have skyrocketed, those kids are still in school. So it's not perfect. I totally understand it's not perfect and safety is important, but I think we have to balance a little bit.
Yeah, Steve, if I could, this is Kevin. I mean, I guess I would add to that there's other counties outside of Dane County that are in much worse shape than Dane County. And they, again, they don't have perfect, but they're managing. And in and out is not great. But again, the advantage of kids being in school, even in intermittent, again, you can't keep going back and forth, but I've got multiple examples that I've shared in past board meetings of my own nieces and nephews. My own sister who was a principal of school, they had to pull back for 2 weeks and now they're back in school. Is it perfect? No, but it's certainly better than 100% virtual for a lot of families that choose that route, and it can be done safely.
Anybody else? Going once? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Leslie, anything at the end?
No, thank you. It's been very helpful to hear your questions and comments. Always sparks my thinking.
Superintendent's report?
I feel as if you probably heard enough from me. So just about everything I could possibly say, I think I put it into that report, and I really don't have anything else to add.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. That takes us to closing item F, future agenda. We have one meeting in December. Okay, we've got, well, we don't. We've got our meeting, our book study. On December 2nd, I think. Nope.
That's December 7th.
Number 7.
Yeah, we have our book study on the 7th and then our regular board meeting on the 14th. And then we will not have a meeting on the 28th. Okay. So that's typically the case. We take that last week off. So one regular meeting of the board. And so we're going to have our standard update from Leslie. She's indicated what she's going to report during that point in time. We will need to have a closed session at that time to talk about administrator evals, Leslie, and go through that process. You and I will work with that, but just anticipate a closed session after that. We do this every year at this point in time, given the timeframes and the administrative contracts to review those. So that will be at that meeting. And then as usual, if any board member has any item that they want to put on the agenda, they should contact Leslie or me for that purpose. All right, checkout, we'll go through checkout. Krista.
I just want to give a shout out to Chloe. I thought her presentation was amazing. And, you know, she's a student leader. She's a peer tutor. She's, you know, getting things going for homecoming week. I really appreciate her positive, get to it, get after it, taking care of her fellow classmates. So I applaud Chloe.
Troy.
Thank you, Krista Flanagan. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Troy.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Anna.
Nothing from me.
Tim.
I just want to send out appreciation to the folks who do write in and do speak up. I know it's really hard to, when we don't have a in-person board meeting. I appreciate the fact that people are stepping forward, speaking up, and letting their perspectives be heard, because I think it's always better for us to hear perspectives all the way around, and a half a dozen additional perspectives to get the meeting started was appreciated.
Heather.
I'm good, thanks.
Kevin. Anything?
I'm good.
I'm good too. So that means we'll move into closed session right now. And then board members, you have the link to go to, but I would consider a motion to go into closed session to discuss negotiating the 2020-2021 collective bargaining agreement with the Oregon Educational Association pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 1985 1E and conferring with legal counsel about those negotiations pursuant to 1985 1G. So I'd entertain a motion to that effect.
I will move to go into closed session. It's Krista.
Is there a second?
I'll second Tim.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Marion, Mr. Maring,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz,
I'll abstain and I'm going to be exiting the meeting.
Mr. Zach.
Yes. Okay. Board is in closed session. We can sign off now. We'll not be coming into open session. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving and a safe Thanksgiving.
Good night, everyone.